Christmas Day, we always have pigs in blankets, or as you probably call it, relatives sleeping in the spare room. It's tradition in our family that we always have a Christmas jumper, and then it's my job to talk them down. Went on a barging holiday, I haven't got a boat, I just kept pushing people into canals. I don't like to eat anything labelled reformed ham, as I think it's unfair that the pigs are slaughtered after they've got their lives back on track. This morning I made a Belgian waffle. In the afternoon I made a Frenchman talk bollocks.
Good morning. It is Thursday, June the 1st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the Declaration of Independence, we will have no free lunch, the rape of the mind, Liz Wheeler, Sean Hannity, promises, Robert Reich, Donald Trump, and Ron DeSantis squaring off in a you decide match. Back in a minute. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen. Quote, "It is true that the virtues which are less esteemed and practiced now, independence, self-reliance, and the willingness to bear risks, the readiness to back one's own conviction against a majority, and the willingness to voluntary cooperation with one's neighbors, are essentially those on which an individualist society rests. Collectivism has nothing to put in their place. And insofar as it is already destroyed, then it has left a void filled by nothing but the demand for obedience and the compulsion of the individual to what is collectively decided to be good." Unquote. F.A. Hayek. The vision for a free and virtuous society rejects the collectivist vision and yet relies on the hope, prayer, and necessity of the virtues embedded in individuals that can make this vision reality: self-government, courage, and individual responsibility. And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Who is the true conservative? He knows that the government has no rights. He is religious. He is patriotic and uses common sense. He makes judgments, refuses to speculate, speaks clearly and definitively, and is not afraid to say no. He's open-minded, asking why rather than why not. He is consistent, credible, and influential, not ashamed of his existence, unafraid to learn or correct his mistakes. He is a normal American. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservative suggested political priorities? Number 1, the abolition of abortion throughout the land. Number 2, make nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons obsolete. Number 3, immediate decertification of all public employee unions. 4, the immediate assignment of criminal and civil liabilities to all government regulators. Number 5, the immediate repeal of the so-called Patriot Act. Number 6, the immediate repeal of all emergency dictator laws. Number 7, the reinstatement of writs of outlawry. 8, government-sponsored recalls, ballot initiatives, and referendums. 9, a flexible minimum wage. 10, means-tested health care. 11, the immediate and permanent prohibition of investment banking by any office holder. Back in a minute. Thank you. What are the true conservative cultural priorities? Bring back hierarchy. Bring back the admiration of intelligence, morality, and beauty. Bring back single-income households, integration, parenting, the primacy of existence, certainty of knowledge, and universal rights and wrongs. Bring back principled behavior, masculinity and femininity. Bring back Adam 12, John F. Kennedy, the gold standard, pre-HMO medical care, and nonprofit news. Bring back civil service, the term stupid question, arguments and fights, the cultural influence of the church and the Boy Scouts. Bring back the influence of social organizations such as the Lions Club and the Rotary Club. Bring back bowling. Back in a minute.
Debt. And that would appear to be a violation of the code of conduct that governs lawyers. You're not allowed to loan money except for minimal living expenses and advancing the cost of litigation, not $2 million worth. He also appears to be entangled in Hunter Biden's businesses, at least one of them. And again, that's forbidden by the canons of ethics. So it strikes me the Bar Association should be investigating.
As June. Let's talk about what's really behind Pride Month. Pride Month is not about equality under the law for LGBTQIA individuals. It's not about tolerance for alternative lifestyle. Pride Month is underpinned by queer theory, which is a neo-Marxist theory that calls for the sexualization of children. The goal of queer theory, and this is, you can read the founder, the goal of queer theory is to destroy objective truth and to separate children from their parents. Children are the pawns in this Marxist revolution that queer theory is advocating for. That's why they're targeting our children. It's why, by the way, that our boycott against Target is so important. It's why I'm so proud that we are not caving to the radical leftists who are trying to shame us for boycotting Target. And it's also why I want to make sure that you guys are using the app that I am so obsessed with right now. It's called Public Square. Public Square, it's an aggregate. So you go on Public Square and it's a list of stores, retailers, businesses that share our values, that support our values, not ones that have caved to the woke mob. So you want to shop at Target, you need something that's affordable. You go on Public Square, you search for what you need, and retailers will come up that carry products that you want that also are, patriotic and support objective reality and biology and aren't Marxist. So hop on over to Public Square, download it. I have a link in my bio that you can download it. Really recommend that you do that. But don't be fooled by Pride Month. It's not about equality under the law. It's not about tolerance. It's authoritarianism and it's Marxist, and they're targeting our children. We ought to reject it.
So that was Liz Wheeler, and she was a couple of remarks about that. First of all, I like the fact that she says we ought to reject it. She uses ought. Could have also used the word should, but at least she did do that. So we're not talking about predictions. She's making a value statement to reject this. She calls again, says the boycott on Target has been great, and we don't know that. We don't know that anybody is targeting Target, so to speak, with a boycott. I like to believe that each individual that's refusing to shop at Target or otherwise dumping their stock is doing it for personal reasons. They're so disgusted with Target that they've decided they just can't shop there anymore. And that's conservative. Because if you go ahead and you join a movement, you're no longer acting as a conservative. You're acting as a liberal, as a lefty. So that's one of the things. The other thing that she said was the town square. Now that sounds like that might be a positive development, because one of my complaints about all of these boycotts is, as I've said, if I followed and boycotted everything that every Liz Wheeler in this country told me to boycott, I would starve to death, because I would have nothing to eat, nothing to drink, and nowhere to live probably. So now that she gives this app that suggests what kinds of places that I might want to visit that share our so-called values, or I should say, my values. That's what's really important here, me and mine. I mind my own business, and but at least she's providing something that gives me an alternative. If I'm going to dump Bud Light, what should I drink instead? Because if I go ahead and drink Miller Lite, maybe they're just as bad as Bud Light. So at least she does give us that option. She has a solution, a true solution to the problem. So good for Liz for saying, though, ought, using the word ought and making a value statement. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the rape of the mind, the danger of mental contagion. Indeed, there is a continual danger of mental contagion. People are in constant psychic exchange with one another. As a country, we have to ask what dangerous mental pollution may come to us from the other side of the border. Let me make it crystal clear that I am far from insensitive to the danger of totalitarian subversion and aggression with which we are now faced. My own experiences with the Nazis made it painfully obvious to me that these dangers must not be minimized. As a psychologist, too, I am deeply aware of the contagious nature of totalitarian propaganda and of the fact that free citizens in a free country must be on their guard to protect themselves. But we must learn to fight these dangers in democratic ways, and I am afraid that too often in our fight against them we may take a leaf from the totalitarian book. Let me cite but one example of this. The Feinberg Law in New York State, enacted in order to protect children against the dissemination of dangerous political propaganda, is partly based on this concept of mental contagion. It aims to protect the schools against the subtle infiltration of subversive ideas. It seems at first sight like a simple solution. You just stop subversion before it can affect the impressionable minds of our children. But the fact remains that it presents all kinds of psychological difficulties. In our fear of being polluted, we create norms and schemes against which we measure the acceptability of unorthodox ideas. And we forget that the presence of minority ideas, acceptable or not, is one of the ways in which we protect ourselves against the creeping growth of conformist majority thinking in us. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Hugo Black, in his dissenting opinion on the Feinberg Law, made this point. Quote, "There's another of those rapidly multiplying legislative enactments which make it dangerous to think or say anything except what a transient majority happens to approve at the moment. Basically, these laws rest on the belief that government should supervise and limit the flow of ideas into the minds of men. The tendency of such governmental policy is to mold people into a common intellectual pattern. Quite a different governmental policy rests on the belief that government should leave the mind and spirit of man absolutely free. Such a governmental policy encourages varied intellectual outlooks in the belief that the best views will prevail. This policy of freedom is, in my judgment, embodied in the First Amendment and made applicable to the states by the 14th." Unquote. Because of this policy, public officials cannot be constitutionally vested with powers to select the ideas people can think about, censor the public views they can express, or choose the persons or groups people can associate with. Public officials with such powers are not public servants, they are public masters. We cannot prevent one mental contagion through enforcing another. The only way we can give man the strength to withstand mental infection is through giving him the utmost freedom in the exchange of ideas. People have to learn to ask questions without demanding that they be answered immediately. The free man is the man who learns to live with problems in the hope that they will be solved sometime, either in his own generation or the next. Man's curiosity and inquisitiveness have to be stimulated. We have to fight man's growing fear of thinking for himself, of being original, and of being willing to fight for what he believes in. On the other hand, we also have to learn to resist ideas. Governments may be overthrown not only by physical violence, but also by mental violence, by suggestive and menticidal penetration of young minds, by rigid conditioning, regimentation, and prohibition of dissent. And that was The Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo, M.D. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now a little bit of Stuart-Varney. He has a substitute host in.
I guess they have nothing left to say. Thank goodness for that. Americans, meantime, still dealing with sky-high inflation a year after President Biden said rising prices were his top priority.
So, again, along the lines of promises. So, saying it's a top priority is not a promise. He's trying to make it sound like it's a promise, but in actuality, it isn't. A promise is when you promise to do something specific in a specific amount of time. For instance, if President Biden had said, "I promise to reduce inflation from this to that and get it done in 6 months," that's a promise. Now he can be held accountable. Now he can be, if you will, punished if he doesn't succeed. You can say, well, you know what? You didn't keep your promise, so next time I'm voting for somebody else. That kind of thing. So, but the politicians always want to make it sound like they're promising when in fact they're really not. So you got to listen carefully to what they're saying. And again, this whole election cycle, you need to make it your mission when you're listening to candidates, and President Biden is a candidate for office, and listen, are they making promises? And if so, what are their promises? And I rather suspect, I don't predict, but I suspect that Donald Trump is going to be the only one making promises, and that the other candidates are either going to make no promises or they're going to make very few. And remember, the reason for this is something called under-promise, over-deliver. It was a business con. That's all it is a con. Getting your customers, under-promising to your customers so that they will have low expectations. Politicians took it to the next step, and they said, well, if under-promising creates low expectations, then providing no promises should provide no expectations. Then we can do whatever we want to do. Think about it. Back in a minute.
Thank you.
More on promises.
The president said today that inflation is his top domestic priority. Has that replaced climate change then for this administration as the top priority?
Well, I would say first that inflation and the rising costs for people across the country has long been the top issue for in every poll we've seen, and certainly has been the number one issue for the president for some time.
So the White House left fighting inflation to the Federal Reserve. You see 10 consecutive rate hikes. Even if there is a pause announced on June 14th, the Board of Governor Philip Jefferson yesterday saying that the Fed might not be done raising. They're just going to wait to see about the lag effect of the rate hikes that you're seeing there, what they've already done. Ashley?
So anyways, the point is that when the press secretary was answering the question, the press people, the White House press corps, didn't ask the right question. Because we got to ask ourselves, well, how do we solve this problem? Politicians not making promises. We demand that they make promises. So Peter Doocy should be, every time he opens his mouth, he should be asking, what does the president promise to do about inflation? When does he promise to bring it under control? He needs to do that again and again and again and again until they get the point that this game of not making promises because they think they're going to get away with something doesn't work anymore. Back in a minute. Thank you. So one of the people that accounts that I follow on Instagram is Robert Reich. Robert Reich is a hardcore lefty, former labor secretary for former President Bill Clinton. So I want to read this to you so I can explain again how the lefties work and how they think. So far in 2023, Republicans across the nation introduced over 500 bills to strip away the rights of LGBTQ plus Americans, largely targeting trans and gender nonconforming people. We need to see this attack on the LGBTQ plus community for what it is, a threat to all of our human rights. And then there's a second page, a year-to-date snapshot. And then it says a bullet point. Over 520 anti-bills have been introduced in state legislature. Over 220 bills specifically target transgender, and it should be transsexual. But they won't use the term transsexual because sexual is a trigger word and it turns people off. The whole idea of being a transsexual, it just turns people off. So they know there's no way they're going to get any sympathy, so they don't call them transsexual. They refer to them as transgender. Third page, a record 70 anti-blah-blah-blah laws have been enacted this year, including laws banning gender-affirming care, laws requiring or allowing misgendering or transgender students, laws targeting drag, laws banning gender-affirming care for transsexual youth, laws requiring allowing sexualizing, of transsexual students, laws targeting drag performances, creating a license to discriminate, censoring a school curriculum, including books, and then it says bigotry against minority groups based on sexual orientation or gender is how fascism takes root. We must speak out loudly and forcefully against it. Now, the whole thing with this, all 4 pages, is it's arbitrary, completely and utterly arbitrary, and it should be ignored. So if you have people that are going to come to you and they're going to use these bullet points as talking points, maybe you're in the break room at work and somebody comes up into you, hey, what's up with Republicans introducing all these bills to strip away the rights of transsexuals? The best answer to say is no, they didn't. Because again, he provides no evidence. He provides a lot of details, but as I've said before, detail is not necessarily evidence. Can be, but in this particular case, it isn't, because he doesn't say where he got the information. If he really wants to be accurate, then he would say, according to, and he would give all, this such and such newspaper, this date, and where it was found, front page, back page, whatever section, as much information as he possibly can. He didn't do that because the left wants to bluff their way through. They want to bluff you. They want you, and they use trigger words. Let's see, stripping away is a trigger word. Stripping away the rights. Rights is a trigger word. Largely targeting, more trigger words. And we need to see this attack, another trigger word. And let's see what else they've got here. Anti-LGBTQ, that's a trigger words. Targeting again appears. Banning, requiring, targeting, censoring. All of those are trigger words, and they're designed to try to provoke you into overreacting. Don't be fooled. All you have to do is just simply deny it. Say, no, none of this exists. None of this has happened. Have a nice day, and walk away. Back in a minute. Thank you. So now we are going to have Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump, and you decide. First up, Ron DeSantis.
Our border is a disaster. Crime infests our cities. The federal government makes it harder for families to make ends meet, and the president flounders. But decline is a choice. Success is attainable, and freedom is worth fighting for. Righting the ship requires restoring sanity to our society, normalcy to our communities, and integrity to our institutions. Truth must be our foundation, and common sense can no longer be an uncommon virtue. In Florida, we proved that it can be done. We chose facts over fear, education over indoctrination, law and order over rioting and disorder. We held the line when freedom hung in the balance. We showed that we can and must revitalize America. We need the courage to lead and the strength to win. I'm Ron DeSantis, and I'm running for president to lead our great American comeback.
That was Ron DeSantis, and now Donald Trump.
Crisis head on, and we achieved the first reduction in overdose deaths in more than 30 years. I also proudly signed the Support Act, the largest investment ever in combating the opioid epidemic. Sadly, under Joe Biden, our hard-won progress has been surrendered along with the surrender of our southern border. It's such a shame. Now fentanyl and other ultra-deadly poisons are pouring into our country unchecked, stealing more than 100,000 American lives every single year, and many people think that real number is 300,000 to 400,000. Joe Biden's record is one of death, destruction, and misery in communities all across our nation. When I'm back in the White House, I will take action on day one to end this horrific plague and save American lives. Joe Biden will never solve the drug overdose crisis because he is actively destroying our border. What he has done to our border, we had the safest border in the history of our country, and now we have the worst border probably anywhere in the world, including third world countries. That's why I have previously announced I will impose a full naval embargo on the drug cartels and deploy military assets to inflict maximum damage on cartel operations. I will insist on the full cooperation of neighboring governments to dismantle the trafficking and smuggling networks in our region, and I will ask Congress to ensure that drug dealers, kingpins, and human traffickers receive the death penalty. At the same time, I will direct federal law enforcement here in the United States to take down the gangs and organized street crime that distribute these deadly narcotics on a local level. They are killing our people. They are poisoning our beautiful children. I will permanently designate fentanyl as a federally controlled substance, and I will tell China that if they do not clamp down on the export of fentanyl's chemical precursors, they will pay a steep price. I had a deal worked out with President Xi. They weren't going to be sending any more, and they were going to impose the death penalty on those that made it in China. But with a rigged election, that ended. Attacking the supply of these deadly drugs will be just the beginning. we must also do more to end the scourge of addiction here at home. Among the most important steps we can take is to strengthen the pillars that give life, meaning, and hope for those struggling with addiction, particular work, faith, and family. We need work, faith, and family. My administration will support measures to make it easier for those suffering from addiction to seek treatment without losing their jobs. We will forge new public-private partnerships for companies willing to provide job opportunities and skills training for former addicts. We will expand federal support for faith-based counseling, treatment, and recovery programs, recognizing that we are going to need God's help to steer our country out of this crisis. Finally, we will ensure that if a parent, child, spouse, or other relative needs to take time to care for a loved one fighting to overcome addiction, they are more easily able to take advantage of the family leave program, so important. When I'm president, we will not rest until we have ended the drug addiction crisis in America. We will win. It will happen. We have to win, though, in 2024, because our country is going to hell. Thank you.
Okay, so that was Ron DeSantis versus Donald Trump. You decide. Back in a minute. Thank you. I'm Ron, your host and the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all of the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. And until next time, be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.